Hi, there has been some questions about how to use the networking of a virtual machine under VDE or the Virtual Distributed Ethernet. So this video is just a short one to clarify how to use VDE when you start a KVM. The first thing you have to do is to make sure that you create a tunnel device, and to do that you have to do it as root. So the first thing you want to do is to change to super user. Okay, and once you change to super user, you will never mind. Once you change to super user, you have to use the command tunctl tunnel control to create a tab device, tab 0. In this case, you can choose another name, but tab 0 is the conventional name, and then -u will specify who can use it. So in this case, it is my regular user account. So yours will be different. So what this will do is, well, since I have that device created already, it complains that it's already created. So that's fine. That's nothing wrong with that. And then the next thing you want to do is, since I'm already in root, is to ifconfig and configure that device. So we'll say ifconfig tab 0. We'll give it a static IP 10.0.2.200. It's just a convenient address to use. So right now I assign an IP address to a network interface that is not plugged into anything yet. But that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Alright, so the next thing is to get out of root mode and continue everything else in user mode. So we'll go to either the client or the virtual machine, and we'll check one thing first. I'll have to check whether VDE is still running or not. So I'll look for VDE switch using the PS command, and it is still being run. So we'll go ahead and kill that process first. 16743. Once that process is killed, all the slurp VDE will also be killed along with that. I also want to make sure that I don't have any KVM instances running, and none of those is running. One of the worst things that can happen is when you run two emulators but using the same hard drive disk image. That would be really bad. Alright, so everything is done here. I have a qcal2 file, which I think is the more updated one. Let me just double check. You can see from the date that the qcal2 file is definitely more updated than the raw file. So that's what I'll use for this example. When you execute the kvm command, this is how we specify the kvm command. First of all, we'll specify the hard drive image. In this case, it's disk.img.qcal2. And then the next thing we want to do is to set up the network. Now, without any network setup, it's actually using a default setup. So let me show you what a default setup usually looks like. The default setup is to do something like this. Okay, -net nic VLAN equals 0. What this part means, -net nic VLAN 0 is to tell the virtual machine that I am creating a network interface card, the NIC, and we are assigning that to VLAN 0, which means it is just an internal number so that we can refer to the same network interface card. But right now it is just installed in the virtual machine. It is not really connected to anything. So the next thing we normally do, when we start the virtual machine without specifying the networking, is this part here. So normally you will also say -net user, VLAN equals 0. Even though we don't say it, it is by default already created for us. So let's go back here and just kind of focus on this user part. User is a special mode of networking for the KVM. It automatically uses the host environment as a bridge to go out to the internet. However, since since we are not specifying any port forwarding in this command, the host really has no connectivity to the guest machine, because we did not specify any port forwarding ability in this case. So in other words, this is what we usually do by default from the very beginning of the class cisn120. But since it is the default, we usually don't have to specify it. Okay. But we run into a problem with this approach because now we want two virtual machines to talk to each other. They're not talking to the host. Well, the host needs to talk to them too, sometimes, but not always. But we need the two virtual machines to talk to each other. So that's why what we need is to specify dash net. The first part is the same, NIC, and then VLAN equals 0 because we are still creating a network interface card and plugging into the virtual machine, but the network port itself is not connected to anything. In addition to this, we have to specify the MAC address because it is important for us to make sure that no two virtual machines in the same switch will have the same network MAC address, because that is just not good to have when you plug in to a switch. And then the next item that we have to specify is -net again. -net simply means that we're doing something with networking, but not necessarily what we're doing. And that's why the next items will specify what we are doing. When we specify VDE, that means we are connecting this particular virtual network interface card to the VDE to a VDE switch. But you can have multiple VDE switches running at the same time in the host environment. So, okay, the next item is to specify which virtual network interface card of the virtual machine are we talking about. So this VLAN 0 is matching this VLAN 0, so we are talking about that specific network interface card. You can have multiple network interface cards if you want to in the virtual machine and connect them differently. Each one can have a different way to connect to the host environment or a switch or stuff like that. And the next item we have to specify is which virtual switch we are talking about, and we do that by specifying the socket, and the socket typically is /10 /switch, and that would be the minimum that you need in order to start a virtual machine in an environment of using VDE. Now this is not going to work, so I'm just going to comment out the whole thing because I have to start the VDE switch first. So we start the VDE switch, and then we specify -s, which is specifying the socket. This is the command that creates the socket. VDE switch is the one command that starts everything. And then we also want to specify the tab device for the host environment, which is tab 0 in this case. And then we specify daemon so that this command will return right away and not just sit there and wait for interaction. You can open it up in the interactive mode, but since we're going to use one single command line to do everything, this is the way we'll do it. Once this is started up, we'll use slurp VDE. Slurp VDE is an add-on to VDE switch. In other words, you have to start VDE switch first. What this does is it can, without specifying anything else, what it does is it acts as a router so that the traffic inside the virtual switch can go outside of the virtual switch, and it is relying on the host environment to get out to the internet. But you can also specify DHCP, which means we want to run a dynamic host configuration protocol server as a part of slurp VDE, and that's what we want to do, at least for the time being. And we also want to specify daemon so that the command will return, but the program will be running in the background. So that's what we need to do. Now we can go back to the kvm command, and I'm just removing the comment symbol at the very beginning in order to start up the kvm. This should start up correctly, and you won't see the entire screen because I changed the resolution. I can actually shrink it to make it fit. Just hold on 1 second. Okay. The cool thing is the entire kvm window is resizable. So you're looking at a shrunk version of what you normally see in the QEMU console. So we're just waiting for the virtual machine to completely start up. That seems to be taking a little bit longer than expected. There we go. Alright. So now that we are inside the virtual machine, we'll log in as root and do a ifconfig and see whether it has connectivity, and the answer is yes. eth0, which is our VLAN equals 0 on the command line, is now connected to the virtual DHCP to the virtual switch, and the DHCP server is assigning an IP address of 10.02.15 to this virtual machine. So let me move this out of the way and use our terminal here. I will type Control-Z to suspend the program, the virtual machine, and then use BG to send it to the background. So this way I can keep running the emulator, but also at the same time, I can now I can execute additional commands. The first thing I want to do is to just do a sbin ifconfig tab0 just to make sure tab0 is up and running. It is up and running, but it doesn't have an IP address yet. So the previous command of using ifconfig was not successful. It did not assign an IP address to it. So let's go ahead and do it again. You have to do it as root. So now we say ifconfig tab0 and then give it an IP address of 10.02.200 and just run it again, make sure. Okay, so that's all good. Exit. And we should be able to ping the virtual machine at this point. Ping 10.02.15. Operation not permitted. I wonder if I did one step wrong by running it as root. Okay, I was able to ping it using when I logged in as root, so I think I might have made a mistake running VDE switch or one of the other ones as when I created this the tune 0 socket, I think I might have created that, and forgot to specify who can access it. So let's go ahead and check whether we can get more information about the tab device. Create and manage persistent tunnel and tab interfaces. And we want to check in this case. Okay, set tab0 persistent and owned by some user. Okay, so now it is persistent and owned by, but it's referring to tab 1, not tab 0. So I think I might have done that part wrong, and that's why I could not ping it. Now let's go back to the virtual machine and see if the virtual machine can ping the host environment. So we'll go ping 10.0 to 200, and the virtual machine can ping back to the host environment. In other words, at this point, the host environment and the virtual machine, they have connectivity through the switch already. You can also check in the virtual machine and see if you can ping Google, and it is not going out. Now the reason why it's not going out can be several things. It can be so when this doesn't work, we have to run route to see if the default gateway is set up correctly. And it does not look like that the default gateway is set up correct. Well, it is. Okay, set up correctly here. And the last item is to see if the resolve file is specifying the DNS server correctly. 10.023 is correct. Let's see here. So let's go ahead now and check the host environment, because if your host environment cannot get out to the internet, then we have a problem too. So in the host environment, we're going to ping Google, and we have a similar issue. I just saw one of my browser, stop working, so I think I have a different issue in this case. But basically, this is how we use the virtual machine. The whole point of this exercise, let me just get out of the virtual machine here, file off the virtual machine, and then get back to the command prompt. Okay, so getting back to our command prompt here, the most important part is this command here. I'm just trying to explain every single part of this command so that you know what to do when you have to start up your virtual machine. You can also look into the client shell script because that also contains basically the same options, except the MAC address is different. That concludes my little presentation of how to use VDE when you're starting up a KVM emulator. Thanks for watching.